The Sixers start making moves in free agency. What do the additions of PJ Tucker and Danuel House Jr. bring to the table? And what else might the Sixers have in store? Also, the Phillies cap off this week with some big wins as they try to navigate the next couple of months without Bryce Harper. This episode of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel starts right now. What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Hirsch. Now, guys, before we get into this video, please like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on so you never miss another upload. And so let's start out this episode by talking about the Sixers. Yes, NBA free agency did open up this past Thursday, June 30th, and the Sixers started out by making a couple of moves, signing PJ Tucker to a 3-year, $33.2 million deal, and Danuel House Jr. to a 2-year, $8.5 million deal. PJ Tucker is definitely a guy you can count on for some solid defense. He averaged 0.8 steals per game last season and 0.9 blocks, so definitely a guy to count on there on the defensive end for the Sixers, and he will be coming off the bench most likely this season. So just more defense for this bench, especially after the Sixers added D'Anthony Melton on draft night last week. So the Sixers are definitely looking to improve their defense. Danuel House Jr., he's more of just a prototypical bench guy. He might actually end up being a deep bench player for the Sixers this season. He only averaged 6 points per game last season and only 42 games played between the Knicks and the Jazz. Because neither of these guys are really bona fide offensive players, at least anymore, fans have definitely not taken too kindly, at least from what I've seen, to these two moves, especially the PJ Tucker move. I mean, I understand fans being upset at the 3-year, $33.2 million for a 37-year-old player who's on the tail end of his career. I am okay with the move just because, I mean, I understand that I guess to be able to pry Tucker away maybe from some of the other teams that were going after him, you probably needed to give him 3-year, $33 million or something in that range because another team would have probably come in and scooped him up if the Sixers had tried to be a little cheap. And Tucker will give you that valuable defense off the bench. He's not a terrible offensive player, at least for coming off the bench. 7.6 points per game last season, but an above 41% three-point shooter. I mean, as the Sixers, I think, saw really throughout the season and then into that playoff series against the Heat in the second round this past season, that he can knock down that corner three. And, I mean, with Harden and Embiid, I do think PJ Tucker does provide a little bit more floor spacing, which is, I think, something that this team is definitely going to need this season. We kind of saw it in 2020, 2021 with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, how guys like Seth Curry and Danny Green and all of them, and even Tobias Harris at times, could really end up spacing the floor well, and that led to a lot of open threes for them. I think it's kind of going to be the same thing this season with Harden and Embiid, considering that Harden's not really the scorer that he once was, but he is still that assist guy. I think you could still expect him to get potentially over 10 assists per game this upcoming season, and just with Joel Embiid, the amount of times he gets the ball down low in the post and in the paint, I think that just having more floor spacing on this team, just so Embiid and Harden could both kick the ball out to some guys for some open threes, I think floor spacing is really going to be key for the Sixers this season, and I think PJ Tucker does provide that, at least on the offensive end. Some other Sixers news that also dropped this week with the start of free agency was that the Sixers are also trying to pursue former player Andre Drummond. I mean, he, of course, played very well for the Sixers last season, went up to Brooklyn and played really well for them, too, and I would love to see Drummond come back, and if they could somehow get him on another vet min, I think that would just be so great for this team, since right now they don't really have a bona fide backup center. I mean, I get it, you kind of have Paul Reed, but he was very inconsistent this season, and I just don't think that he's the type of guy, especially if you're going for a championship this year, I don't think Paul Reed is the answer to back up Joel Embiid. I mean, we saw how much better this team was when they had a bona fide backup center to kind of give Joel Embiid that rest that he does need during the course of the game. We saw it in 2020, 2021 with Dwight Howard. We saw it again for the first half of last season with Andre Drummond, and then we've seen how bad this team could look at times, especially their bench could look at times, when they don't really have that backup center. The Sixers tried a whole bunch of players at that position last season, including Paul Reed, including Paul Millsap, including DeAndre Jordan, all of which did not work out, and we saw just how bad this bench looked when all of them were out there. Another rumor that has kind of been swirling around this week has been about Tobias Harris potentially being traded to either the Sacramento Kings or the Utah Jazz. I think this Utah one might have a little bit of steam to it. I saw that the Sixers might be trying to trade Tobias Harris and trying to acquire Bojan Bogdanovic. I think this would be a very great move for the Sixers, honestly, especially if they could get some other pieces in return from Utah also, who seem to be potentially wanting to rebuild after they traded Rudy Gobert for about half the Timberwolves team yesterday. And Donovan Mitchell has also been rumored to be on the trade market, another guy I think the Sixers maybe should look into. But anyways, I mean, I think that the Sixers can get Bogdanovic and maybe a couple of other players from that team in return for Tobias Harris. I think that could really help the Sixers. Again, Bogdanovic would be another excellent floor spacer for the Sixers, and getting rid of Tobias Harris would really help the Sixers in their cap situation. Currently, they are $29 million approximately over the cap right now, and they're going to have to find some way to get under that. And it's going to be difficult, but some news that also dropped this week could definitely help the Sixers in that category, and that's the fact that James Harden did opt out of his $47.3 million player option for 2022-2023, and there are rumors that he might be willing to come back to the Sixers on a 2-year deal worth less than $40 million, maybe in that mid-30 to upper 30 range, which would only be about maybe $17, $18, $19 million AAV. That could really help the Sixers in getting under the cap, and you can tell that if those rumors are true, that James Harden definitely wants the Sixers to win this year. He is going for a championship this year, and I think that's the Sixers' goal, that's his goal, I think that's everybody's goal in the organization right now. And I mean, Harden potentially taking a much lesser deal could definitely be a huge factor in the Sixers potentially getting there, just because of the money that it would free up for them to use. Perhaps the biggest news around the NBA this week with the start of free agency was that Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets requested a trade out of Brooklyn. I mean, how great is that? How great is that? The fact that this Nets team that was supposed to win multiple championships and be really the first major super team. I mean, you could look at the Warriors as maybe being the first super team, but this would be the first assembled super team via trades and free agency and all of that. And they basically tear it all down after 2 years and not even getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. They obviously trade Harden to Philly. Kevin Durant looks like he's going to get moved, and it also looks like Kyrie Irving is probably going to get moved in the near future as well. It's just so great watching the Nets, which was supposed to be, again, they were supposed to be the best team in the NBA for multiple years in a row, and they basically are gonna end this whole thing after 2 years and 0 finals berths, 0 Eastern Conference Finals berths. It's just really great to see as a Sixers fan. It really is. Of course, with KD requesting a trade out of Brooklyn, we all start to think, oh well, what would it take perhaps for the Sixers to land Durant? And I think people do have to keep in mind that the Sixers right now, it's going to be tough for them to land Durant. And it's because Brooklyn they are asking, at least rumored, for 2 all-star players in return. Now, the Sixers have 2 near all-stars in Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris. Now, I think I just might have ruffled some feathers. I were mentioning Tyrese Maxey's name in some trade conversations. But to get KD, I think it would definitely have to be considered. And it definitely have to be done. I would not let Tyrese Maxey be the player to hold up a potential Kevin Durant trade. Of course, we're nowhere near that point yet. However, if you do look at some of the assets that the Sixers potentially have to be able to trade to Brooklyn, you have to remember that, first of all, they can't trade a first-round pick until 2029 because of some conditions owed to teams just through trades and pick swaps and then protected picks. Such as in 2025 to Oklahoma City and in 2027, in fact, to Brooklyn. So the Sixers are not really going to be able to make any moves, at least regarding first-round picks. So if you look now kind of towards the players the Sixers have, I mean, you look at Tobias Harris, of course, you look at Tyrese Maxey, of course, you look at Matisse Thybulle, Furkan Korkmaz, Shake Milton, all guys that are potential trade candidates for the Sixers if they do wish to try to go out and get KD. The Sixers do have the second best odds, according to DraftKings, to land Durant. The Suns are number 1 at plus 250. The Sixers are number 2 at plus 600, and then the Heat are number 3 at plus 800. There are rumors that Kevin Durant would like a trade to Phoenix. I saw that Boston also is really trying to enter the Durant sweepstakes. A lot of people think that Jaylen Brown could end up being moved in a potential Brooklyn-Boston trade for KD. But I do think right now the Sixers probably should focus most of their attention on just basically retooling this bench. I mean, again, it would be really nice to have Durant. I just think it's going to be really tough for the Sixers to be able to trade from, especially after the Nets gave the Sixers, or traded the Sixers, James Harden. I don't know if the Nets really want to basically disassemble their supposed super team and then ship them all off to Philly, a division rival. But yeah, so the Sixers should be focusing right now on acquiring some bench talent and probably looking to trade Tobias Harris as well. Some other names that the Sixers might be looking into, at least for free agency, one being Eric Gordon. I think he'd be a nice guy to have, another player who could really space the floor for this team, another guy that James Harden is familiar with their time with the Houston Rockets. Juan Toscano-Anderson is another one, a guy that can really give you some good minutes off the bench, some valuable minutes. He's an NBA championship, of course, this season with the Warriors. So a guy that can maybe bring in a little bit of experience to this team, especially some of the young guys that we're going to have on our bench this year. I think that he would be a really great addition. And then I mentioned Tobias Harris potentially being traded to Utah. Another team is also that he could potentially be traded to are the Kings. Some mock trades there kind of include Harrison Barnes potentially coming to Philly. I think he would probably be a little bit smaller of a player than Bogdanovich would be, and maybe some other guys from Utah, but definitely a name to keep your eye on if you're a Sixers fan. There are also rumors maybe that Tobias Harris could be headed to Portland. Josh Hart's name, he's been thrown around in some trade rumors recently. I mean, I think he would love to come back to Philly, of course, a Villanova guy. So he went to college around here, and he's also an excellent player I think the Sixers would love to have. And he would probably be a very good starter, I think, for this team, too. So right now with the Sixers, I think it's kind of just playing the waiting game. Just because I don't expect any major dominoes, at least for this team, to fall maybe in the next couple of days. Maybe if you look into the next couple of weeks, as the free agency kind of settles down a little bit, Daryl Morey can maybe start to make some moves. Switching gears now into the Phillies, who, all things considered, had a pretty good week this week. They went 4-2. They took the last two games of that Padres series from San Diego, 4-2 and 8-5. They then came back home and lost the first two games of the Atlanta series, 5-3 and 4-1, but then pounded the Braves in the final game of that series, 14-4. Won again last night against St. Louis, 5-3. And because of that, now sit just a game and a half behind the Cardinals for that final wildcard spot in the National League. They're just a half game behind the Giants for that 4 spot, as the Giants lost last night to the White Sox. So Giants a game back, Phillies a game and a half back. They're also just right now 4 back of Atlanta for second place in the East and for that second wildcard spot after they dropped 2 or 3 in that series. But, I mean, the Phillies are definitely knocking on the Cardinals' door. And I think this week, one of the themes for the Phillies, really the whole season, kind of showed itself in glaring fashion over these last 6 games, and that is the hitting with runners in scoring position. The Phillies, in losses this year, are hitting under 200 with runners in scoring position. However, in wins, they're hitting over 300, and that story proved true again this week. As you saw just in those games against Atlanta, they had just terrible situational hitting, terrible hitting with runners in scoring position. They were definitely able to clean that up for the next 2 games. The 14-4 win against Atlanta on Thursday, they had great situational hitting. I mean, if you look back at that 7-run second inning they had a ton of hits with runners in scoring position. Last night, same thing in the 5th inning. They looked really good with runners in scoring position, although they didn't necessarily get a ton of hits. They had very productive outs. Kyle Schwarber, excellent at bat there to score the run and to advance the runner, Moniak, over to third with his ground ball to second base. That made the game 3-2. Hoskinson came up next, hit a fly ball to center field, which scored Moniak. So some more very good situational hitting and some more good hitting with runners in scoring position for the Phillies there. That ended up tying the game 3-3. The Phillies would then go on to win thanks to a home run by Darick Hall, now Long Ball Hall, as I think we should all be calling him, considering the fact that he's got 3 home runs and 4 RBIs, and his first 3 hits to Philly are all home runs. He had 2 in his game on Thursday, 1 yesterday. Rhys Hoskins, he also added a home run. Phillies win that game 5-3. But I mean, let's kind of keep talking about Long Ball Hall. How great of an addition has this been? I mean, it's almost like Rhys Hoskins-esque when he came up in 2017, started mashing. I'm not saying Darick Hall's going to hit as many home runs in Rhys in as short of a time, but I mean, he's definitely looking like he could be a very good power hitter for this team, especially while Bryce is on the IL with that thumb injury. I'm not saying that he's really going to come up and provide all the power, all the other good things that Harper does, but I mean, he could give this team maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 homers for these next couple months. I mean, heck, he hit 20 homers in a few months down at AAA. So I think that it's very possible that he could give this team a much needed power spark in the middle of this lineup, as we've seen with him over these last 2 games. He's got now 3 home runs in his first 3 major league games, and then of course the 3 in the last 2. I mean, and these homers aren't cheapies either. These are 5, 10, 20 rows back into right field. I understand the one was off a position player, but I mean the other 2 were off of major league pitching, no matter who it is, and especially last night off of Miles Michaelis, came to the game with an ERA of 2.57, and Hall takes him deep, and it's just so cool to see. I mean, just the excitement on Hall's face when he's hitting these home runs. I mean, kind of like they said in the broadcast last night, a lot of guys try to hide it. Not Darick Hall. I mean, he's going around those bases smiling the whole way. He's getting back in the dugout. Teammates are loving on him. He's smiling. I mean, it's just so great to see. I think really that enthusiasm and that excitement has also really provided a much-needed spark for this team. And of course, I cannot talk about Phillies Major League debuts this week without mentioning Mark Appel, the 30-year-old rookie, the first overall pick in 2013, who took multiple years away from the game, finally got his chance to make his Major League debut on Wednesday night against the Braves. Threw up a scoreless 9th inning. It was just so cool. It was so great to see him just out there on that mound. He looked pretty good. I mean, he looked like he had some stuff there. That windup is definitely a little funky. Had some other things for the hitters to kind of be looking at. I could see why the hitters could struggle off him just because of that delivery. And then he also comes in the very next night in that Phillies 14-4 win against the Braves, throws up another scoreless inning. So 2 scoreless innings from Mark Appel in his first 2 major league outings. I mean, just really cool to see, and an excellent story there. Alright, so previewing this upcoming week for the Phillies, are going to finish this huge series against the St. Louis Cardinals today at 4:05, then tomorrow at 7:08. The game today is on NBC Sports Philadelphia. The one tomorrow, national TV. Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. We'll then be off for July 4th before taking on the Nationals in a 3-game series at home. All those games will be on NBC Sports Philadelphia Tuesday, Wednesday at 7:05, Thursday at 4:05. They will then head to St. Louis for another big series against the Cardinals in a wraparound series. That series will begin at 8:15 on Friday. The next 2 games, both on the weekend, are at 2:15. And the final game is at 7:15, again, all on NBC Sports Philadelphia there. And the Phillies are able to carry over the momentum that they've got from these last 2 games into this next week, especially with all these games coming up against St. Louis. I mean, they could conceivably find themselves, by the end of that second Cardinals series, or maybe even going into that Cardinals series, in a wild card spot. Yes, in a playoff spot. Again, they're just a game and a half out, which means as long as they win these next 2 games, and the Giants lose one of their next 2 against the White Sox, the Phillies will end up being in that final wildcard spot. Again, the Phillies need to go 2-0 this weekend and have the Giants go 1-1 or 0-2. If that happens, the Phillies will be in that final wildcard spot by the end of the weekend. Alright, that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. Again, guys, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on so you never miss another upload. I normally upload every Saturday. However, next week's upload will be out on Friday. I will then not be able to upload for the next 2 weeks. So next week's upload will be out Friday, July 8th, and then the next upload after that will be Saturday, July 30th. So definitely make sure you have notifications turned on for that one. So again, next episode will be out on Friday, July 8th. But until then, have a good week, everybody. Happy 4th of July. I'm going to go watch Volume 2.